As the next speaker of this morning, I would like to welcome back on our stage the representative of our gold sponsor CISCO, Philippe ROGGEBAND. He graduated in 1980 at the Imperial College of Science and Technology in London with a degree in computer science. So he's more than 30 years in the business already. With CISCO, he's since 2000, I think, and at the moment he's the business development manager for CISCO's security architecture. And today he will introduce us their concept about securing the Internet of Everything. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. Slides are up. OK, let's get going. So good morning, everyone. As mentioned, I'm a senior business development manager at CISCO. I've been in the security business for about 10 years within this company, but also had the opportunity of working in security in previous organizations before joining CISCO. So I guess that most of you know at least about CISCO. You know the name. You probably know us primarily as a networking vendor. So you may wonder why we're here. Well, in fact, I sometimes think that it's one of the best-kept secrets in the industry today, but we're also a cybersecurity company. In fact, it's one of the domains in which we are investing the most heavily, mainly because we believe security is not a noun, it's an adjective. People don't buy a they don't buy a security architecture. They buy a secure network, they buy a secure data center, they buy secure collaboration solutions. And really, security is more something that has to be attached to everything that we do so that we can actually perform the tasks that we were going after. So why is CISCO present at an event like this one? Two main ideas behind it. The first one, of course, it's the opportunity to share with an audience such as yourselves the work that we are doing in the cybersecurity space. But I think more important, and I believe I speak both for myself but also for some of my colleagues who are in the room, it's to learn. It's to listen to the specific constraints that we find in such a sensitive area as national security and defense, and to understand how we can better work and collaborate in the context of public-private partnerships to making national security a safer place and making it really working as best as it can. I'm sure you've seen many slides like this one before, so I won't elaborate too much on it. We know that the people we are facing today are highly skilled professionals. In fact, we compete with them to try and recruit the best professionals. They pay higher salaries than even we do, which makes it even tougher. There's a lot of money to be made. Luckily, the people going into the hacking business at some point in time hopefully get caught, and after a few years in prison, then come to work for our industry as highly paid consultants. So it's quite a common career path, I believe. Just one word about, however, the threat landscape. I attended a really interesting presentation at CISCO in Dubai a few weeks ago, and one of the presenters articulated the security threat landscape as a graph with two axes. On the one hand, you could plot the skill level of the hackers, and on the other hand, their focus level. And luckily, all of the low-skilled attacks, whether they are low focus or high focus, I think we can deal with those. Low focus, it's typically the standard viruses, monofile type of attacks. We can detect those. Low skill, high focus, spear phishing. We can deal with that. It's when we start moving into the arena of highly skilled attacks. Some of them are low-focused. All they're trying to do is just harvest as much data as they can to put it on sale. But then we have the ones who are both highly skilled and highly focused. And that's when we find ourselves facing advanced persistent threats and other really complex types of blended attacks. And that's really where we have to put our focus. One of the presenters, I think it was Angela from Microsoft yesterday, said, if you try to defend everything, you end up defending nothing. And it's really this that I think is important. We can automate a lot of the protection against the low-skill stuff, but we're going to need really much more complex approaches to all of the complex stuff that we find ourselves dealing with. Hello. OK. Oh, one. So the trend's going to continue. It's going to continue mainly because cybercrime is lucrative, or there is something to be gained from a military or a hacktivist perspective there. Why is it lucrative? Because there's money to be made. And how many of you have Facebook accounts in the room, or admit to having one, at least? So depending on the number of friends you have, your account credentials are worth more or less. And I think the average going rate is $1 for 15 friends. so that if people manage to break into your account, they can actually sell the credentials. The more friends you have, the more valuable your account is going to be as a way of reaching out to people. And it's just going to keep on going that way. There are so many ways of making money. I could spend this entire presentation just describing the threat economy and the way that it works. But I won't, because we're here to talk about IoT security. So with the Internet of Things, the reason why we picked this topic as for the presentation is when I looked at the theme of this year's CISCO conference, the expansion of cyberspace, I thought, well, typically that's the Internet of Things. We're just going to have more and more devices to protect as we see this formidable growth in terms of connected objects and all of the promises that they bring with them. So the one thing, however, that we have to be clear on is which Internet of Things are we talking about? I tend to classify them in 3 categories. First category, it's all of the objects that will get connected to an IT environment over which we have some level of control, typically our IT infrastructure. And that one is probably, I wouldn't say the easiest to deal with, but it's one that we already have processes, procedures, and a little bit of know-how, mainly because we've been dealing with non-authenticating objects connecting to IT infrastructures for years. Printers, faxes, IP cameras. So as we start developing new applications, including applications specifically for the military domain, such as the connected battlefield or battlefield situational awareness, we should be able to apply some of the technologies that we've already put in place and that we've already been using to protect the connection of those new objects. So probably not the biggest problem. The second category, it's the one that comes from already existing networks, but in the industrial control space. Those tend to fall under the Internet of Things world or scope, but when you think of them, they're really a totally different type of problem to try and address. Industrial control systems were designed years ago, and security was not really a concern. In fact, the basic principle was security through obscurity. Isolated networks using industry-specific protocols, usually non-standard, not based on IP. Well, they're standard, but in their own specific environment. And so less subject to attacks and to threats, adding to that the fact that they were isolated. So critical infrastructure providers typically use these extensively to create energy, to distribute it, to handle water supply. So we're going to have to take these into account when we are defending a nation. Defending critical infrastructures is going to be essential. Now, these industrial control systems, as I said, used to be isolated, but no longer. Most of the industries today are moving from models where they build to stock to a model where they build to order. So as a result of that, we see interconnections now being put in place between the IT world of those energy suppliers, for example, and the OT, the operation technology, usually with the DMZ between the two, which is like a mythical air gap. You sort of think you're protected, but you're not really. And at the same time, we are also seeing a shift towards standard protocols and commoditized software being used in those industrial control systems. In other words, they become a new addressable market for the hackers, and a target they will go after. And we have seen a number of cases. I won't dwell on attacks like Stuxnet, we all know these, but more recently in Germany, a steel factory was attacked and resulted in physical damage actually happening as a result of the attack taking place on those industrial control systems. And they are probably the most complicated to protect because, again, they were not designed with security in mind, but in addition, they've got specific constraints. You are not allowed to introduce latency in an industrial control system because they work in a loop form. You are getting data from a sensor, and based on that data, you activate a valve to release pressure in a piece of equipment. If you start blocking traffic, if you start introducing latency, that can lead to disaster. So we're really going to have to think seriously about how we can adapt some of the technologies we have in the IT world to protect ourselves from the attacks that will make their way to the OT world and get them to work there as well. And then the other big problem we'll have to face, it's the exponential growth. The expectation, for once, all of the analysts seem to have almost similar numbers. Normally they tend to agree to disagree. But in this case, the general figure that I keep on seeing everywhere is 50 billion connected devices by 2020. And a lot of these are going to fall under the third category, which is consumer technology. That's probably the one of least interest to today's audience. Consumer technology, it's basically the wearables, the fitness bracelets, the connected fridge that will detect automatically that you're running low on eggs, milk, and butter, and will order them for you. Those could get hacked. Probably not too much of a problem if they do, except you may find yourselves with 10,000 eggs being delivered to your doorstep. You'll have a problem. I think where we will, however, start to investigate what happens in the consumer technology space will be for equipments like next-generation televisions that will be IP connected. They will have a camera built in, typically used for video conferencing. But imagine if a hacker breaks into the service provider's network, will be 1984, and television will be watching you. So typically, there'll be things to be done in this space as well. Anyway, it's a huge promise, but it's also going to be a huge world with which we're going to have to deal. So just a few words on the connected battlefield. CISCO has a number of vertical subject matter experts who try to look at use cases that are specific to certain markets. We've actually got a dedicated team that has been focusing heavily on what can we do to apply Internet of Things capabilities to environments such as the military space. And we came up with this use case or this solution called the connected battlefield. What it's about, so hopefully they won't be lugging this big suitcase with CISCO gear in it all over the battlefield, but the idea really is to equip soldiers with sensors, with communication capabilities that will really be able to provide connectivity as far to the edge as we can. And of course, this is not something that can be achieved if we don't build the right security measures into these networks. To me, this falls under the first category I spoke about. It's the extension of the IT network. It's having new categories or new types of objects being connected to an existing infrastructure, IP-based, and a lot of the technologies we are developing, we believe we will be able to apply in this environment. Now, I'm not saying that we'll be able to make these 100% secure, resilient, and we'll be able to block all of the threats, but we'll do our best to reduce vulnerability in the attack surface as much as possible. And in most cases, we will not work by ourselves. We've got a number of industry partners who are dedicated to the military world, and they embed a lot of the technology that we develop for security purposes inside their equipment. The only thing is you will never see the CISCO brand on these because it's generally white-labeled technology that they will integrate within the solutions they put in place. But the good news is a lot of the stuff that we're doing, including detecting attacks, including strong authentication methods, including network segmentation, network-based enforcement of policies, are applicable and can be used without introducing latency in these kinds of environments. There again, it's a topic we could speak about for hours, which I don't have, but you're welcome to visit us on the booth to know a little bit more about these. And we also have a live demonstration that can be seen in our Executive Briefing Center in London. And if you're not located in London, it's accessible by telepresence from any of the CISCO offices. So I really encourage you to contact, if you have a point of contact within CISCO, if you want to know more about this solution and how it can be applied. Now, it probably didn't escape your attention that I've been speaking so far about the Internet of Things, and yet the title of the presentation is Securing the Internet of Everything. That's a marketing term, Internet of Everything. Our people in San Jose are very, very creative, but it really does try to explain that our vision, it's not just about connectivity. If I speak about Internet of Things, for me what this means, it's giving objects the capability of speaking in IP with application servers, and it ends there. The way we define the Internet of Everything, it's really bringing together people, processes, data, and things so that we turn the information collected into something actionable. And the data piece there is essential. And what I mean by this is it's going to give the capability for users to have applications and services that are really personalized. That's on the service level. But on the security level, I think there's also a lot to be done with the data that will be collected. What I mean by this, if we analyze the application level data with a security purpose in mind, we can actually end up understanding people's behavior patterns. That's where we bring the people, the things, and the data and the processes together. A simple example, if I have a specific device that I use for online transactions for banking purposes, by analyzing the data, not so much the data itself, more the metadata, the history of the transactions I've performed, without knowing how much money are transferred to what account. This is irrelevant. But it's just looking at the way that I normally use the technology. And the system could understand that it's normal pattern for me to, for example, perform my transactions early on Monday mornings and not the rest of the week. So any deviation, any transactions performed under my name at any other time could be perceived to be a fraud. So I know I've been hearing a lot of debate about privacy and that sort of approach over the last few days, where people feel that they're being watched a little bit too much. It's true to some extent, but also think it's probably a generation thing. Most people in my age group, I won't point at anybody in the audience specifically, we tend to consider that anything we do not specifically make public is private by default. When I look at my children, their attitude is that anything they do not explicitly make private is public by default. In other words, they feel quite comfortable with data being analyzed as long as it's going to be either to provide them with a better service or to make them more secure. Of course, this has to be done within the legal frameworks for it to actually be acceptable, but that, again, is an entirely different debate. So what is our technological approach to making the Internet of Everything more secure? Well, we apply a model called the threat-centric security model, or the Attack Continuum. Again, great marketing terms, but it's really breaking down what needs to be done in 3 phases. There's the stuff that you need to do before you're going to be attacked. Notice we don't say if, it's before. I've heard it several times in this conference already. 2 kinds of organizations, the ones that have been compromised, the ones who don't yet know that they've been compromised. So before, it's really all about defining the right policies, determining what it is that you want to protect. And I know I'm a products guy, so most people who give this presentation at Cisco start telling you about access control, firewalling, etc. I don't think that's the most important. The most important before is know what you want to protect, know what your access policies are, know what the procedures you're going to put in place when the attack takes place, educate the people, and then deploy the right products to protect yourself. In this before phase, what you're going to deploy, it's really targeted at reducing the attack surface and the vulnerability level. It's not going to make you 100% secure, it's just going to make the hacker's life a lot more difficult, which is a good starting point. Next, we have the during phase, the attack taking place. In one of the presentations on Tuesday, I saw this being broken down into 3 sub-phases: infiltration, lateral movement, and exfiltration, assuming that the purpose of the attack is to steal data. This is where we're going to have to determine that we are being attacked or that indicators of compromise are making their way into the network. If they're low-skilled, we can detect them. I'm not worried about that. If they're high-skilled types of attacks, then the lateral moves piece is going to be essential, because it's going to be multiple components that make their way into the network, and determining that they are trying to propagate, trying to investigate and find their way to a suitable target. That will be the way we'll be able to track them down. And I'll explain how very briefly in just a few minutes. And then there's the after phase, stuff you need to do after an attack has taken place, assuming you've been able to contain and scope it out, but you still need to do stuff. Typically, it's forensics investigation, understand how the infiltration took place, and then update your policies and the before piece of the puzzle, so that the same attack doesn't happen again. There's one thing that many people tend to forget in this phase, and that's to look for potential traces of the attack remaining so that a second phase could happen. The analogy I make is, if your house gets burglared, don't just change the locks and the PIN code of your alarm system, but also remember to look under the bed to see if there isn't an accomplice of the burglar still hidden there. And that's what needs to be done, and that's really important. So the imperatives we have to take into account when we build this architecture. It has to be visibility-driven, and after the workshop I attended yesterday, I'm going to change this to being situation-aware. I think it's a much better term for it. It's understanding what's on your network, how it's behaving within the context in which you are operating. It's being threat-focused, knowing about the latest kinds of attacks. To this purpose, we've got a dedicated team called Talos. And for once in Cisco's history, this is not an acronym. It's actually the name of a Greek god who was in charge of protecting the island of Rhodes. Talos is a team of 600 specialists scattered around the world, operating around the clock to analyze traffic on the internet, as well as to analyze data that comes from a number of our most trusted customers, to determine new attacks, new sources of attacks, and to identify new indicators of compromise. Don't ask me where those guys are located. It's classified information. Even I don't know it. All I know is that we use this information to inform our customers about the latest threats, but we also share dynamically this information with our products if our customers agree to having a cloud-based approach to security intelligence. And finally, we believe this has to be platform or architecture-based. Having a security architecture made up of all of the latest product of the month that protects you against the threat of the month is unmanageable. Some of our customers, we actually identified as many as 80 different vendors or products in their environment. That's unmanageable. Consistency is key to security. If you've got 80 different management consoles, there is no way you are going to achieve consistency. So how does this come to life? When anything, any object or any person connects to our network, the first thing that we try to do is establish a context. This is what is going to make us situation aware. I really like that term. I'm going to use it a lot more in the future presentations. It's really identifying the user, if there is one, or the device. It's knowing what it is, what its purpose is. It's determining where it's connecting from a geographic perspective, how it's connecting, whether it's through a secure or unsecure connection, and what the time of day is. If it's an unauthenticating device, we profile it to understand the standard behavior we should expect from it. If it's an authenticating device, we associate a very granular policy with the user that's behind this device. How does that then translate into enforcement? Well, we are going to tag all of the data emanating from this device with security information that will get interpreted by the network fabric. This is specifically important to the OT industrial environment because it means we can start applying security policies at line rate without introducing any additional latency. Now, we're going to analyze this traffic as well to try and see whether it looks like an attack. So, 3 possible options. We know it's malicious, we block it if we're not in an OT environment. In that case, we raise an alert. We know it's clean, we let it through. But then there's the gray zone. Sometimes we're going to see data that we're not too sure about. It can be a device or it can be a file. So what we're then going to do is activate something that we call device trajectory tracking or file trajectory tracking. In other words, when lateral moves start to happen in the attack phase, we're going to make sure that we track every single server or endpoint that the file touches and every single pieces of the network that the device attaches to. That way, if at a later point in time, we find out either from the Talos guys or from the behavior of the file that, in fact, it was malicious, we can go back in time, we can backtrack, and we can then clean up and get rid of any remaining traces of this attack. Because most attacks are blended and multi-component, we believe that working in this way will probably be able not to stop networks from getting infected, but at least we'll be able, hopefully, to stop attacks from being successful. There will still be cleanup work to be done, but really the main purpose, it is to stop attacks from being successful. Now, as the Internet of Everything, or the Internet of Things, whatever you call it, and cybersecurity come together, the one thing we need to acknowledge is their worlds are going to collide. People who create connected objects, security is not on their mind. In fact, the majority of the consumer objects are going to be based on Android technology. That is the biggest surface of attack today. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying Android is not a good operating system. What I'm saying is that the hackers and the malware writers have identified it as being a really formidable addressable market. And so the growth rate of new attacks on Android is roughly 800% per year, according to our annual security report. So we need to acknowledge the fact that with the Internet of Everything, the attack surface is going to expand. We need to deal with this. Threat diversity and sophistication, of course, that's going to keep on increasing. The hackers are smart, they'll stay smart, and they'll keep on working, so we're really in a catch-up game permanently with them. Risk and impact are going to escalate. Remediation is going to become much more urgent and more complex as the attacks get swifter. This window of opportunity we have with the lateral moves phase, that's bound to get reduced in time. So we'll need to be a lot more reactive in the way that we deal with this. And so visibility, situational awareness, I think that's really going to be paramount. So, and actions will really need to be swift. In other words, Internet of Everything, as far as I'm concerned, will need to be secure or it will not be at all. So what is it that we as an organization would like to bring to the table? We believe we can bring visibility on what's happening because we leverage the network. We don't just use features coming from security appliances or security components. We really try to use everything we can extract from the network fabric as well to security ends. We believe in consistent control, having a single source of truth for security policies, because that, again, it's the starting point. We believe in advanced threat protection and intelligence, and I think nobody can match the power of fire that Talos really brings to us. As I said, 600 engineers and really high-skilled people, most of them PhDs. It's a huge research organization. And finally, we believe in reducing the complexity through an architected approach. And this concludes really what I wanted to cover. As I said, it's such a vast topic, and I get, probably you notice, quite enthusiastic about it. I could go on for hours, but I won't, because I was asked to leave some time for questions.
Yep. Yeah, thank you very much, and we have time for a couple of questions, indeed.
Wow, no questions? So this means one of two things. Either I totally confused you, or it was totally clear. So I hope it was the latter of the two. If you do have questions coming to mind later, do visit us on the booth. I'll be there for the whole day today, and I'll be more than happy to answer any queries that you may have then. So thank you very much for your attention.
Yeah, thank you. And also for you, and token of representation. And also thank you for supporting our conference.